Welcome to How Women Inspire. Today, we're talking about something that impacts every single one of you. We're talking about healthcare. We're talking about innovations for women in healthcare. We're talking about the startup ecosystem. We're going to cover a lot of grounds, and I cannot wait for you to meet Elyse. Elyse is an expert in transforming groundbreaking health ideas into thriving businesses with a really enhancement of patient care as the main focus. So it's all about us, those things that have frustrated us. She knows how to make it happen. She's got an unbelievable background. Today, she's CEO of her own consulting group, and she's supporting startup founders to scale their health innovations. But really, the goal is, how do we really impact millions of patients? How do we get this out really big? Most recently, she co-founded Clear Mask, the first FDA-cleared and CE-marked transparent surgical mask, growing it from $0 to $45 million in just 2 years with zero outside investment. She was the COO on that project. So well done. That is often the route I encourage people to take. That'll be interesting to dive into. Prior to this, she was managing director of My Healthy Toolkit, which is a cost-effective corporate wellness program acquired in 2016. Elyse launched her career at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, holds both an MPH and an MBA from Johns Hopkins. Very impressive. My goodness. In such a young age, you just really took on the innovation in this industry, and we are so lucky that you did.
Thank you so much, Julie. There's nothing more exciting than getting health innovation out there to patients, hearing their stories and what they need, and knowing that you can make a difference by getting it out there. Innovation is exciting, and the healthcare industry is a wonderful way to help people. So I'm excited to dive in.
Well, before we do that, do you have a theme song or a song that you break out on the tough days or the good days?
Yes. So I just learned about this artist, Jody Harsh. She is a drag performer and also a musician. And she puts out really fun disco music. This one track has really resonated. It's called My House. And I've gone public recently with my consulting firm and how I help startups. And it just feels like my house. She says, everyone's welcome in my house. And that's how I feel about the health startups. Like, let's all get together. Let's get this innovation to people who need it. I'm welcoming everybody in, and it just aligns. And I'd love to have fun disco music going during our meetings too.
Awesome. Well, I think that sounds like the uplifting thing we all need throughout the day. So wonderful. So you have been on a bunch of startup teams. What do you wish you had when you were building these companies? Were there any things you're like, if only?
Oh my gosh. Anytime I was on one of those startup teams, when we got to talk to a mentor or somebody, an advisor who had been in our shoes before, it just sped up the process so much. The person who's the most helpful is somebody very specific and somebody who's done it before in our industry. So anytime we could get somebody in healthcare, in medical devices, who understands the landscape, we could see, okay, this is our future when we're at scale and we can get there faster. And the second thing is someone who has been there building it 0 to 1. I never thought startups could be so emotional, being a co-founder and like being the owner and having it be your idea out there. And someone who's been through that and knows what it's like. Friends and family can support you, but someone who's been there in your shoes, there's nothing like it.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for saying that. So, my experience, I don't know about you, but everybody wants to give advice. Everybody wants to help other women, especially people who are marginalized and not centered, right? So asking for that advice and asking for that help can really be the game changer. So getting over our egos, maybe even.
Oh, absolutely. The more people you can bring in, the faster it gets to market, and then you can help patients faster.
Yeah. Understood. All right. So you've had been in a couple different kinds of healthcare startups. What's the difference between inventing a new health innovation versus actually running the startup itself? And how do you think about your own skill set needed for each?
Totally. So this is the point where in startups, I see the biggest potential failure to launch. So if you're inventing a medical device or a new digital health product, that is incredible. You need engineering skills, or you may be a clinician or subject matter expert. So think like a doctor, nurse, physical therapist, somebody who sees patients all the time, knows exactly what they need, has been doing it for 20 years. And then they have the engineering skills, or they're a biomedical engineer on top of that, and they create something incredible. Incredible technical skills. But to get that out there via a startup, you need to be able to speak business. You need to be able to speak finance. You need to be able to translate those amazing ideas into something that the business world, the healthcare world will understand, and they can see the value in. And so that's why a lot of times you see this brilliant CTO who's invented it, but then you need a CEO, a COO, somebody on the business side. A lot of times that's me coming in and being like, okay, let's take this and then let's get other people excited about it. Because if you're doing things right, usually the founders are the first people doing sales, they're the first people doing marketing. And so you need both skill sets in order to get it out there.
Do you feel like you've seen examples where people could bridge both, or do you feel like it's really two different types of personalities and skill sets?
Sometimes they do bridge both. It is so rare, but
Yeah.
every once in a while you get a physician or you get a nurse, you get somebody who can be an engineer, who can be their own salesperson, who can be the business person. And they're the true rock stars. They're the unicorns out there. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Well, I love that you shared that. So often people will come so passionate about their idea when they pitch us. And part of me is like, oh, honey, it's the bridge to get to all the other elements. Like as an investor, it's great that you know the problem and you have a solution. How am I going to pay my LPs like you back? How am I going to
Mhm.
make sure that we can take this and have a good road with good financials and good, unit economics and all the things that you need to have when you've got a venture-backed effort. So, yeah. So what about the myth that startups are chaotic and stressful
Oh.
or that sort of, the thing that's out there, that story that's out there?
So I feel like this myth needs to die
Okay.
because I think those startups that are chaotic and stressful all the time, they're not managed,
Yeah.
simply put. So there's this myth out there, especially in the media and different things, that the only way you're being successful, the only way to show that you're passionate is your working weekends. Like you aren't in touch with your family and friends. You're just completely head down.
Yeah.
And startups take years. You're not going to be an overnight success. You're going to have worked really hard for years and then an opportunity comes in and you grab it. And so if you're working on something for years, you can't be on a fast track to burn out. There's no way. There's no way that you can have that energy
Right.
when that opportunity opens up to take it. So I think instead, a really good way to go about it, if you're on the executive team of a startup or if you're advising a startup, what I would always tell them to do, think about what the company looks like at scale, build a strategic plan backwards, and treat it like a job. You're moving forward and you're moving along your strategic plan. Yes, you learn new information in startups and you may need to pivot or change, adjust that strategic plan, but keep moving it forward towards what it looks like when you're at scale and work backwards like that. And it can just be a regular job that moves forward towards a goal. Like,
Well, and if you believe it's going to be chaotic and stressful, it will be. Like if you allow
yes.
that into the lexicon, into the story, right? I think if you want people to be there for the long haul, it's one thing if you're on a sprint and you're going to sell it in 3 to 5 years. Even that should be reasonably sustainable. But
Mhm.
certainly if you're on a long-term development track, it's impossible to do that at the kind of pace that people talk about.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, every time that I have taken a break and I've stepped away and I've done a vacation, like no contact, no work on vacation, I always come back with better
Oh, yeah.
ideas. And
Yeah.
I think everybody does.
Yeah. I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm not asking for a seat at the table. My friends, this is the first generation of us. We have a huge opportunity. We have power and influence and wealth. And we can start building the tables where we get the prime seats. Today, we want to invite you to join us as investors in venture. I know no one's asked you to do it before. It might be something that seems scary or foreign, but I promise you it's not that different than investing in a mutual fund where your retirement funds are. I want you to lean in and just learn a little bit more. How about making the commitment that in the next 12 months, you can give yourself 12 months to figure it out and to take a step? I want to invite you to be part of the new table of power and influence and wealth. You're invited. I want to sit at the table with you because we're going to make big change. We're going to make the world we've been dreaming of. So let's talk about how you actually design the health technologies to be successful in the marketplace. What are the things that, as a multi-time founder now and a consultant, what are the things that must be in place?
So I feel like the healthcare industry is really unique in that you have so many messages for so many stakeholders. So in a lot of different industries, maybe you're selling directly to the consumer, or there might be an intermediary or even two intermediaries. And healthcare, it's one of the most complicated.
Yeah.
So let's say you have your new invention. Of course, it needs to serve patients, has to be comfortable, easy to use, not complicated, appealing. And then you need to think about who is administering it to them. A lot of times it's a provider that might be, prescribing it to them, or somebody who's like working with it. Let's say it's a new surgical innovation. They're working with it in the surgery. And so how do they think about it? Is it appealing to them? Is it comfortable? Is it cost effective? And then there's the person who's buying or paying for it. So if it's a more simple path, then you might just have to work with the hospital administration, and they want to get a good return on their investment. They're only going to bring in a new supply, which is a lot of administrative work to bring in a new supply or a new product,
Yeah, right.
if there's substantial value. And if you're working with insurance, which is a great way to make things more accessible for everybody to get covered by insurance, then insurance demands at least 2 times the value. And usually what that looks like is you use this device now for an intervention, and then in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, you don't have to have an invasive surgery. You don't have to have a really expensive
Yeah, so you're
treatment
saving
that it
twice
prevents
as
it.
much money as you'd be spending for sure.
It has to be at least twice as
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
If you could get 4 or 5x, that's
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
But you need messages that appeal to all of these stakeholders minimally. And providers are overwhelmed right now. Clinicians have way too much to do and not enough time. And if you can fit it in and really understand their workflow, you're going to get greater adherence and not put an additional burden on them. Make it easier. Don't make it harder on them.
So you've done innovations that have been healthcare overall, but also for women, right? And so let's talk about the role of women. It was like the late 90s when we literally required human trials to include women. And now someone just said, I was speaking at a Healthcare Business Association's conference, and they were saying, mice don't menstruate. And like mice are used for all of these testing. So let's talk about women's innovation for women and women leading in healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So like you said, the research hasn't been done on anybody except European white males. And that's a minority of the people on this earth. They're starting to show that things that we thought we knew about women, we didn't. For example, you need to change the amount of medication they receive because women are more likely to overdose. We need different things in our bodies. And our bodies, it's seen as sometimes like a mystery. It's not a mystery. It just wasn't researched. We intentionally didn't learn about it because women were excluded for so long. And I've been so excited. I feel like the tide started changing in January of 2024, and there's a new surge right now.
Yeah.
I feel like women's health is finally getting its spotlight. Yeah. There's ARPA-H funding that's coming in. There's DoD funding, Department of Defense funding that's coming in. And people are starting to understand when you have a product for 50% of the population, that's a huge market. It's an opportunity.
Right.
Not only is it the right thing to do and get women the care they've always deserved, but we can make a lot of money.
Yes. No question about it. So do you feel like you're seeing women innovating as leaders in healthcare? Like do they manage and lead differently?
I do think so. I think that we're finally speaking up and saying things like endometriosis is debilitating and we need better care for it and better detection for it now.
Yeah.
Things that before didn't get the gravity and didn't get like the level of intensity and concern that they've always deserved are starting to get it now. And once you name something and then once you actually put the level of intensity and how it impacts people that's accurate, not diminishing women's pain, especially women of color's pain. When you call it what it is and match it to the same standard of care that you would give to men, then all of a sudden there's a lot more care options that are coming through. And I'm so glad that women are speaking up because it's time for us.
Yeah. Wonderful. God, we're so lucky to have you taking this experience from what you've already learned and done and sharing it with others. Do you have an aha moment that you had in your life where you're like, it's very clear now?
Yeah, I had 2. So in my last startup, ClearMask, we were scaling it during the pandemic. And as wild as things looked on the outside, behind the scenes, people, working in the pandemic, it was 10 times more wild. It was just so chaotic. It was unprecedented. And we were constantly making decisions. We had a women-led team. We were 3 out of 4 women co-founders, which was great leadership and great to work with them. We were constantly making decisions where we did not have enough information because nobody had enough information. And we're making huge decisions that would literally impact millions of people. And it was like, okay, you got 10 minutes to make the decision. Let's go.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking one time, our team is so smart. We had wonderful staff. Any of them could be in my seat. But what the difference is I'm the one taking on the risk and I'm the one who's dealing with the consequences of my decisions. They're dealing with the consequences of my decisions. But if it's successful, then I'm successful and everyone on my team is successful. If I fail, it's on me. And I actually heard recently there's an initiative to get women to play poker so that we learn risk and tolerance and make better business decisions. And I feel like getting women more used to making risky decisions or adjusting for risk is something that our culture hasn't necessarily cultivated, but it's something that we can inherently do really, really well. And we're very good at thinking clearly in those stressful situations.
It's so interesting. We did a research study on the investing behavior of women and men and found that women were not risk averse. We were just risk aware. And the men would take big risks based on their gut that was not necessarily financially successful. So it's very interesting when you sort of think we can each do a little bit more of what the other does, so lean in a little bit more perhaps. But I think culturally, this is, my experience is men are promoted and hired for what their potential. That's why they get those jobs with, when they don't have all the categories that they've already accomplished. But women, it's what you've already done. And so how do you think about how are we going to, if women only get 1.8% of all venture funding, how are we going to transform the market so we can get more women founders out there? Do you have thoughts and feelings about that? I mean, clearly you're putting
lots of
money where your thoughts and your beliefs are, right?
Absolutely. So we're in a position right now where financing is really tight. It's difficult for venture. And so it's also difficult to allocate as much funding to startups. And so what I keep hearing, especially from medtech, is you need to go for that non-dilutive funding. And in a lot of ways, women have always been shut out of venture funding. And so we've gone for non-dilutive funding. We've stretched the amount that we have, and we're expected to do 10 times more with 10 times less funding. And so in this environment, we can compete a lot better. If we can't access that funding anyways, we're going to find ways to go around it. And that's what we need to do right now, given the funding environment, unfortunately.
There's so much more I want to tackle with you, but we're almost out of time. Do you have a last tip that you could share with people that you want to make sure everybody can lean into?
Yeah, I would say when I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next, I thought, I'm going to bet on myself. If you're looking to join another company, you're betting on that company. But I'm like, you know what? The safest investment that I can make is betting on myself because I know I can do it. I remember I look up to my mom a lot. She and my dad ran an audiology practice successfully for 30 years. And one of her mentors told my mom, if you're going to work this hard, you should work for yourself. And she kept telling me that too. And so I've really embodied it. And I think lots of women, you can run your own businesses. We can do this. There's this myth that it's a lot more complicated and scary than it needs to be. But we got this. We've always been doing it successfully.
I love it. I love that. That's such a mic drop moment. Elyse, how can people find you?
Sure. So you can find me at my website. It's elyseheob.com. And my name spelling is different. So I'll spell it. It's ELYSEHEOB.com.
And people can find you at your website, your LinkedIn. Well, boy, are we lucky to have had one of the most influential, successful founders and entrepreneurs who's now helping other people with giving them great advice. Thank you so much. And just honored to be on this journey with you.
I love it, Julie. Thank you so much.